back in time and making better choices is not an option. Death is the most permanent. It's the most permanent, murder is the most permanent type of crime possible. There's no coming back from that. And in many ways, there's no coming back for the families. The next factor is whether the defendant has a history of prior delinquency or criminal activity. And Mr. Naylor has a record that is very criminal. He does have a long history of his mental health issues and a long history of not getting help or taking advantage of the resources that were offered to him, at least on a few occasions during his life. I do want to respond to a few comments. There was a comment made indicating that Mr. Naylor had never done anything violent, and I don't disagree with that. But to me it's significant that, and this is in the pre-sentence report, when Mr. Naylor's marriage was breaking up, he made some very violent and threatening statements. And I don't know if he made them to this person or if these were made in a more private setting, but he wanted to kill his wife's, they had separated, there was some kind of a breakup, and perhaps she was dating somebody new. Mr. Naylor had some very significant violent thoughts toward that person. I don't think he acted on them. But they were very dark thoughts, and they were very violent thoughts, and he made statements about wanting to kill that person. That was a red flag, or should have been. And although the defendant has a very clean criminal history, he has a long history of substance abuse. And Mr. Cannon alluded to this, but he alluded to the danger or the impact of substance abuse on someone who has schizophrenia. Mr. Naylor started consuming alcohol when he was either 12 years old or 16 years old. There was some conflicting information on that. He started using marijuana at a very young age. And although he stopped a long time ago, I get the impression that there was a lot of marijuana use for a number of years that couldn't have helped his mental health. The defendant used cocaine for a long time, and it seems like he used that frequently. And there were fairly lengthy periods where he was clean. But then he used methamphetamine very heavily, I think starting when he was about 52, so not very long. And then he stopped the methamphetamine use after he was hospitalized in about 2021. The defendant has continued to use alcohol, I think occasionally at least, for his entire life, except while he was incarcerated. I've worked with a lot of people that have severe or serious mental health challenges. I preside over a drug court and DUI court, and part of the counseling and therapy that those defendants get is focused on their mental health. And almost universally, I hear the experts talking about how alcohol or drugs of any kind, other than what is prescribed, is going to be detrimental to that person's mental health. And if they are trying to take medication that's prescribed, the efficacy of that medication will be harmed by using alcohol or marijuana or cocaine or methamphetamine. Those drugs will not work the way that they should when that is happening. The next factor is whether the defendant's criminal conduct is a result of circumstances unlikely to recur. Unfortunately, in this case, if Mr. Naylor is ever returned to the community, these circumstances are likely to recur. Even though he's medicated, Mr. Naylor still endorses some of his conspiratorial thinking. And maybe with time and continued medication, he'll move away from that. But he still believes in some of the conspiracy theories that he held before these events took place. I don't think he has good insight yet into what happened and why it happened and what it's going to take to avoid something like this happening again. In the pre-sentence report, Mr. Naylor talked about how he knows he has to take this medication, but it makes him feel groggy. Sometimes he feels over-medicated. That makes me think that if Mr. Naylor is released, at some point, he will fall back on some old thinking patterns and start to think to himself that I don't need this medication anymore. I don't like the way it makes me feel. It makes me tired. It makes me irritable. They're giving me too much medicine. And if there's, at some point, if there's a way for him to stop taking it, he will, if he is in the community. That's what has happened in the past. Maybe someday Mr. Naylor will fully understand how important his medication is and how that's the only way that he's going to avoid falling back into those old thinking patterns. But at this point, I don't think Mr. Naylor has that level of insight. The character and attitudes of the defendant indicate that the commission of another crime is unlikely. I think right now Mr. Naylor is doing the best that he can to take responsibility. He's showing remorse. But I don't know what the future holds. I think as long as Mr. Naylor takes the right medicine, he will gradually better understand what happened and why it happened. But I'm not sure he's there yet. Whether the defendant demonstrates amenability to treatment, right now he does, but he has not in the past. He's chosen to self-medicate, and he's deliberately not followed medical advice that's been given to him in the past. I think anything other than what is recommended in the plea agreement would diminish and depreciate the seriousness of the defendant's crimes. Imprisonment does provide the appropriate punishment and deterrent. It's the only way to protect the community. And I think Mr. Naylor does recognize that. I'm not naive. I don't have the same level of experience with mental commitment cases that Mr. Cannon does, but I have a lot. When I was a public defender, I represented individuals who were facing involuntary commitment for mental health issues. When I was a prosecutor, I prosecuted hundreds of those cases. As a magistrate judge, I spent almost 12 years hearing those cases in my courtroom. And so I know what it's like to deal with somebody who is suffering from schizophrenia. I know what resources our community has. And I can tell you that whatever shortcomings exist in those resources, this is not the forum where we can fix that. I don't make policy. I don't pass laws. I think those people who have experienced the impact of those resources or lack of resources in their lives, those people should be involved in those policy decisions and work to make our laws better and stronger. But what I do know is that Mr. Naylor was hospitalized when he was in his early 20s. And at that point, I don't think he had a full understanding of his mental health diagnosis. But he should have had some insight and should have recognized the importance of getting some help and getting some treatment. He didn't. Maybe he was too young, too immature, but he's still engaged in substance use, didn't get the help that he needed. And I'm not surprised for somebody that young. That's not shocking. But the more recent hospitalization that Mr. Naylor had in 2021 should have given Mr. Naylor the resources that he needed to treat his mental illness. He was delusional, he was hallucinating, he ended up in the emergency room, ultimately at Canyon View in their behavioral center for about a month, I think. And then a bit less than a month in the state hospital, where Mr. Naylor got significant help. He got back on the right medications, away from the substances that harm him, and he was given a discharge plan that, had he followed it, all of this could have been avoided. And I'm going to read from some comments. I made some notes. And it was mentioned in the pre-sentence report that back in 2021, at least for a short period of time, Mr. Naylor started taking Haldol, which is the drug that has been so beneficial to him. When he was released from the state hospital, at least in the beginning, he was medication compliant. When he was discharged, he was recommended to participate in medication management services, recommended to participate in individual counseling to address insight and skill building. He was recommended to participate in outpatient substance abuse treatment, case management with continued mental health services. Apparently, he didn't follow up. He had felt in the past that psychotherapy was a waste of time. He stopped taking his medications, despite knowing his history of hallucinations and delusional thinking. Our system isn't perfect, but there are a lot of resources in this area for someone who is willing to accept them. And Mr. Naylor, you were always capable of working. You generally held a job. You're intelligent. And when you were released from the hospital in 2021, you had good insight, at least for a short period of time, into your mental health issues. And that was the time for you to get help and stick with treatment and medication. But you chose not to do that. And you set into motion the events that led to these 4 murders. Those were choices that you made. And are not excused by your mental illness. In fact, it was noted in that discharge summary, he has good insight into the presence of a mental illness and is willing to continue treatment upon discharge, including substance use treatment. Mr. Naylor had people trying to help him. He's had family trying to help him, and he was rejecting that. I do want to go over a timeline of what happened. And it's very sad and very ironic that we had a Vietnam veteran lose his life right around the 4th of July. But it was somewhere around the 4th of July, after Mr. Naylor had been hearing voices for a long time, that he and his 2 imaginary friends started collaborating on how to deal with this child trafficking conspiracy that was imagined. That children in the community were being sexually abused or even murdered. that they were being trafficked, exploited, that their body parts were being sold. Shocking stuff that's really hard to take seriously, but when somebody latches onto that, you can see that the outcome that can take place. Mr. Naylor believed that some sort of device had been implanted in his neck so that these voices could communicate with him. And as of the pre-sentence report, he still believed that. He's driven to protect children that he thinks are being trafficked and exploited. And he believes the solution is to kill those traffickers himself, not to call law enforcement, to let the law take its course, because the police are involved in a conspiracy or so he thinks. And so he felt it was his obligation to take the law in his own hands as a vigilante and find and kill these traffickers. Apparently the voices were telling him that there was trafficking taking place at Connor's Cafe. So he ended up there and was told that Mr. Nix was a guard or a sentinel. He was parked behind Connor's Cafe, and so Mr. Naylor executed Mr. Nix by shooting him in the head. A few days later, on July 8th, he's at the post office in Rupert to open a post office box so that he can communicate with some of these, aliens or powers that were helping him fight trafficking. And he saw a family, I believe a mother and a father, 2 young children, and he came to believe that these children were victims of trafficking and that he had to take the parents out. And so he tried to follow them in their vehicle, but lost track of them. His imaginary friends told him that they were in a black car. He sees a black car, follows it to a residence in Rupert, and it turns out that this is Angelica Medina's residence. She was not who he had seen at the post office, but she ended up being another victim who was executed in cold blood in her own bedroom, forced in there by Mr. Naylor, told to get on her knees, told to say her prayers, and she was shot in the head twice. In a place that should have been her safe place, her refuge. Instead, her last minutes were filled with terror and fear. And I still don't think we have a complete explanation from Mr. Naylor of what happened. Because that was a 17-minute encounter. I don't know what happened when Mr. Naylor was in that residence. It didn't take 17 minutes to complete that execution.
Your Honor.
He was then directed to Burton Avenue near Storywood Park. And this is a park where kids play. This is a residential street. And he drives down that street until the voices confirm that he has the right home, and it happens to be Donna and Kelly Jenks. I believe Kelly was on the phone with a close friend, and Mr. Naylor went into the house and shot him. In his own words, shot him center mass. Kelly's wife, Donna, either sees or at least hears what happened. She tries to hide in her closet. Mr. Naylor shoots through the closet door twice, and with one of those shots hits her in the chest. She did not die immediately. She was still alive when Mr. Naylor opened the closet door and shot her in the head twice. Imagine her last minutes. He then came back to Kelly, who was still showing some signs of life. Shot him in the head. That was an 11-minute encounter. And Mr. Naylor had the presence of mind to recognize, or maybe the voices told him that he needed to make this look like a robbery, and so he spent a few minutes pulling things off of cupboards, opening boxes and things like that. He then drove to Shoshone in Lincoln County, where his intent was to kill a sheriff's deputy, having been informed by these voices that there was a deputy there that needed to be killed. And it is amazing what law enforcement was able to accomplish by figuring out where Mr. Naylor's vehicle was, getting word to law enforcement throughout the Magic Valley, and then deputies getting him stopped, and then for whatever reason, the voices at that point told him that he could cooperate because it was the Burley police that were part of the conspiracy, not the police in Lincoln County, or the bloodbath may have continued. There were other hints in Mr. Naylor's past of this conspiratorial thinking. When he was young, he spent a year at Idaho State University but dropped out because he had decided that the professors there were too liberal and that they may have been part of a Chinese communist plot. So there were warning signs. A 1992 stay at the Canyon View Behavioral Health Center, the 2021 hospitalization that we talked about. Mr. Naylor has been diagnosed with schizophrenia and a major depressive disorder, partial PTSD. Never did take advantage of outpatient therapy. He has been medicated at times in his life. And what I think is most important and significant, he has had access to the resources he needed for treatment if he were willing to accept it. And I'm not saying by that our system is perfect. I'm sure it can be improved. But Mr. Naylor had chances to make better choices and to get the treatment that he needed. Right now, Mr. Naylor's insight into his mental health issues is diminished. I think it's getting better. This may prevent him from recognizing early signs of medication-related risks. This is information I've taken from the evaluation. Without medication, he is at risk of decompensating, and then he becomes dangerous. And the evaluator says, so this is an important overriding consideration for broader safety. Active psychosis would result in a high risk of danger to others. I do appreciate that Mr. Naylor is taking responsibility by pleading guilty. I've been impressed with his openness. I have sentenced a lot of defendants with schizophrenia, and Mr. Naylor might be the first who's been able to come into court and give me a fairly accurate description of the crimes that were committed. That is rare. And so I respect Mr. Naylor is trying. And he does deserve some credit for that. But no, nothing Mr. Naylor does or says can change what has already happened. And what happened was completely unnecessary. It was totally senseless. And to this day, I really can't figure it out. So many lives shattered. The term heartbreak doesn't even begin to describe it. I can't find the right words. And most of the family members can't either. It's indescribable. With that said, I think the plea agreement strikes the right balance between protecting society, deterrence, and punishment. Mr. Naylor, you will not ever have the chance for parole. You will spend the rest of your life in the Idaho State Penitentiary. So let me go through each count, and I will announce your sentence. Starting with count 1, murder in the first degree, in CR 1625, 2984. For the murder of Kelly Jenks, I hereby sentence you to a sentence of fixed life imprisonment in the Idaho State Penitentiary. For count 2, murder in the first degree, for the murder of Donna Jenks, I hereby sentence you to fixed life imprisonment in the Idaho State Penitentiary with no possibility of parole in either count. Count 2 will run concurrent with count 1, but the sentence in this case will be consecutive to the sentences in the Minidoka County case. The enhanced penalty for use of a firearm or deadly weapon will be dismissed. Turning now to CR 1625, 5546. Count 1, murder in the first degree. For the murder of Angelica Pearl Munoz, also known as Angelica Medina, I hereby sentence you to life imprisonment in the Idaho State Penitentiary with no possibility of parole, fixed life. In count 2, murder in the first degree of Dennis Mix, I hereby sentence you to life imprisonment in the Idaho State Penitentiary, fixed life with no possibility of parole. The sentence in count 2 will run concurrent to the sentence in count 1. However, the overall sentence will be consecutive to the sentences in CR 1625, 2984. This means that you will be serving 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. I will impose the statutorily required court costs on each count. Public defender reimbursement of $500. And instead of a fine on each count, I will award a $5,000 civil penalty with respect to each count and each of the 4 victims. I will grant you credit for the time that you served. You will be ordered to provide a DNA sample and a right thumbprint impression to the Idaho State Police at your own expense. You will be ordered to pay up to $100 to reimburse for the cost of the pre-sentence investigation. I will order restitution as it was set forth in the pre-sentence report, and I will leave restitution open for a reasonable period of time in case there are other claims that need to be made. I will communicate with counsel about the possibility of entering no contact orders to the extent the state thinks it's appropriate, and to the extent any protected person wants to be named in a no contact order. I know that can be kind of a sensitive issue, and so that's an issue we can take up later. Mr. Naylor, your sentence with respect to each count will be imposed. No part of those sentences will be suspended in any way. I will advise you that to the extent you have not waived these rights, you do have the right to appeal. Any appeal needs to be filed within 42 days from the file stamp on each judgment of conviction. If you cannot afford an attorney on appeal, the court will appoint one to represent you. All parties, victims, and counsel are ordered to return any copies that they may have of the pre-sentence report or any evaluation. Mr. Larson, can you think of anything else that we need to place on the record?
Not at this time, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Stevenson?
Your Honor, the only matter that hasn't been addressed completely is child support. And just for the record, I used the guidelines and the birthdays of all 4 children, and as they turned 18, I kicked them off, and that was the amount that I had come up with based on the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare records.
Counsel, I think what I would like to do that, where there has been an objection expressed on the record, I think we'll need to set that for a hearing.
Okay.
I need to do some research. It may be an issue that we end up resolving fairly easily. We may need to have a hearing on that matter. And I think rather than scheduling that now, I would like to take a look at some things, do some research, and then I will have my clerk reach out to counsel to get a hearing scheduled if that's necessary.
That's fine, Your Honor.
Mr. Stevenson, do you have anything else?
No.
Mr. Cannon, do you think of anything we failed to cover?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Archibald? Mr. Naylor, at this time, I will remand you to the custody of the Cassia County Sheriff for delivery to the Idaho Department of Correction for the service of your sentence. With that, we'll be in recess.
All right.